Hi everyone, I am Ashish and I am a part of the Tech Alliance program team. So on this slide, what we are looking at are the QRadar protocols on the left hand side, extreme left. What you see are the QRadar protocols that are supported. Inherently, we have 50 plus protocols that are supported. Some of them are vendor agnostic, like the syslog, SMBTail, JDBC, etc. And some of them are very vendor specific, like the Microsoft Exchange or Apache Kafka. Now, all these protocols that are mentioned here for those particular log sources have been tested by IBM, and hence we say that these protocols are supported. In the middle, we have something called as a QRadar undocumented protocols. Consider a log source. For that particular log source, we can fetch the logs using say 3 or 4 different types of protocols. But if IBM has tested just one of the protocol, the rest of the protocols are said to be undocumented protocols. And as they are not tested, they are also not supported. On the extreme right is something about the Universal REST API protocol. In earlier days, when we wanted to fetch data from, say, a cloud native application, what we used to do is we used to write a QRadar app that used to query the cloud app, get the data from there. In the QRadar app, we used to convert that data into a syslog format and then send this syslog data to the DSM. Now, this QRadar app had to do multiple things, that is, fetching the events, converting it into say syslog, that was another CPU cycles which are involved, and then sending it as syslog, which we know that is not very efficient way of doing things. So in all, everything that was being done earlier was kind of inefficient, cumbersome, and was also very high maintenance to integrate the new products. But if you are using say a universal REST API protocol, what you just need to do is that you need to query your cloud app or the cloud native app that you have. You get the data in the JSON format. You do not have to convert it. You just have to send the JSON data as it is. We know that the JSON data is easily parsable, and hence the use of QRadar Universal REST API is pretty important. It makes the integrations more efficient as well as very low on maintenance. Now we'll dive a bit deeper into what is Universal REST API and how do we use it. So when we say that we have this protocol, there should be some configuration behind it to understand what is the data that we want to fetch from our cloud apps. So to understand what is the amount of data, what are the kind of the data, after what interval this data should be pulled, all of this is mentioned in this workflow XML file. And there is another file called a workflow parameter file, which just provides the parameter values to whatever programmatic stuff that we have written here. It's in the XML and is pretty explainable and easy to understand. So once you get the JSON data in the DSM parses it, and on the extreme right, what you see is a screenshot of the event details that you see on our QRadar for any of the events. So the two important files to understand are the workflow XML file and the workflow parameter XML file. So how do you build this workflow XML file? So I have just taken an example. One thing that I would like to mention here is that, as we have said, that there is a GitHub community in which many people have already written this XML files for different security products, and those are available for everyone to look at, to see, and to edit for your own way. So what I've done is I have a file, say for the integration for a product called say Okta, and here you can see that the version is 1. Now this universal REST API protocol has also been updated over time. So we have two versions of it, version 1 and version 2. We recommend that you use the version 2 because it has many more features than the version 1. This is just taken as an example to make you understand how the workflow is. So it's a XML file where you mention the parameters. So the parameters are the things that will be used in our code which in the actions below. So what are the parameters for this particular integration? we have a host and an authentication token. So host will be the endpoint, and we'll have to mention the host name, and the authentication token will be the API key for the same. And then there is actions. So actions includes everything that can be programmable. So what is the first thing that we do? The first thing that we do is to initialize the bookmark to understand from where we have to fetch the logs. Once we understand that, then we can write a code to fetch the events. This is just by calling the endpoints, putting in what are the limits that are limits, that is the number of events that you want to fetch, and the authentication token for sure. After that, if while fetching events, if there are any errors, these errors can also be handled using error handling tools and that are mentioned below. After fetching events, the next step is to post these events to the host. And after posting the events, the next thing is to update the bookmark so that the next time this query is run, you will be able to fetch the new types of events. So that is all about the actions. And now about the test. So these tests are available by QRadar, and these tests are usually done on the environmental factors of the QRadar, like the DNS. Is the DNS working fine when we are trying to connect with the host? Is the TCP connection fine? If we have a proxy, is the proxy working fine? So all these tests are also available. We highly recommend that you use these tests in your configuration, and the reason is so that if there there is any problem, it becomes very easy to troubleshoot when the tests are available in the code. The second file is the workflow parameter file. So in the first file, you have seen that we have mentioned here something like the host, and we have not actually mentioned the host name and the authentication token. But workflow parameter file is the file where we have to include the names of this host and auth token here. So when a customer downloads these both files, what the customer will do is he will edit this workflow parameter file and mention what is the host that he wants to fetch data from and what is the API key or the authentication token for the same. So this is the only type of configuration that the end customer will have to do. Once you mention that, these parameters are then passed to our workflow XML file, and the workflow XML file helps in fetching the required logs. Another aspect of the Universal REST API protocol is something called as state and actions. As we said that Universal REST API protocol is programmable. By that we meant that there are several actions which are available. So actions like logging, actions like having conditions like if else, having loops where we have a do while loop for each, and all these programmatical things are available with the UREST. This is a hyperlink. If you click on it, you will go to the documentation of all the actions that are available. Along with the documentation, very explainable examples are also provided for each of the action that is mentioned here. So this is all about the actions where you have a board clear status and you can actually fetch the only data that you require, and you can even do something like logging in the debug file so that while troubleshooting it becomes easier. The second aspect of the Universal REST API protocol is a state. State is nothing but the JSON object that we receive from the cloud native application. So the JSON object that we get should be persistent. That is, say if the QRadar is upgraded or by mistake some of the services are restarted, the JSON object remains as it is. Also, there is a capability for us to encrypt the JSON object while in transit. The third option is for the querying. As it is a JSON object, we can query it using something called as a JPath. Also, when you click on these states, you will go to the documentation of the states, and uh, quite a few examples are provided for the states also. If you have any further questions, you can always send us an email for certain clarification, and we'll be happy to help you with that. And the fourth one is something called as a template string. So something that comes under, say, we put in a dollar and a parenthesis, and herein we can call certain items, or we can do some arithmetic logic saying that if it is something is true or false, or count the number of results for the offenses. These kinds of programmatical things are possible when we are using Universal REST API protocol. And hence, this protocol is pretty powerful and easy to use. So, yeah. Now we come to the section where we add the Universal REST API as a log source, the protocol as a log source, where in the QRadar classic. So the first thing is you go to the log source management, you select the protocol type. The protocol type available is, say, Universal Cloud REST API protocol. Once you select it, you have to put in a name. You can put in the name of the integration that you are doing, and as well as the description. Once these things are done, the next thing is about the log source identifier. The log source identifier is a unique payload string which identifies that a certain type of payload, when it is coming, whether it is a JSON, syslog, or any, it basically maps the payload to a particular log source. So here, if we say that custom.api.com, if my payload contains this, then whatever is in the payload will be mapped to the log source that I'm creating right now. Then it is about the workflow and the workflow parameter values. So we'll have these two XML files ready with us. Once we have these files ready with us, we will copy paste them here. The workflow file will go here with the test that you see, and the workflow parameter values go here. The workflow parameter values will contain the values of the values of those parameters that need to be passed. Here, the customer will have to make changes to the parameters for the specific endpoint and for the specific authentication tokens and whatever parameters that are mentioned here. Some of the parameters can even be optional. So, right documentation on this part will be very helpful. So once it is configured, the last part is about testing the protocol. When we said that in the workflow at the end of it, there were certain tests available like the DNS test and the proxy test. So this is exactly how it looks like. So once you configure everything, the last part is to start a test. Once you start the test, all the three tests that you have mentioned the QRadar will check if it is working, and if it is working, you will see something like a option saying that testing DNS resolution passed, testing TCP connection passed, testing SSL connection passed, and so on. So this was all about how you add a log source in a QRadar Classic. Now we said that the same thing is also applicable for the new generation QRadar suite, and hence here the UI looks pretty different, and the reason why it looks pretty different is because of the UAX that we discussed earlier. Now here, once you go, you click on the hamburger menu, you go to the connections. After going to the connections, you go to the ingestion data sources. In the QRadar Classic, we went to the log source manager app. Here we are going to the ingestion data sources. Once you go to the ingestion data source, the screen that you see is almost very similar to the log source manager. You click here and say add a new data source. After clicking it, you can then mention whatever the name of it is, and then you can select a connector type. When you select a connector type, you can basically tell them that it is a protocol, which is a Universal Cloud REST API protocol. Here you can see there are two tabs, an overview tab and a connector tab. So once you are done with the overview, once you come to the connector, again you have an option for the workflow and the workflow parameter values. So here you have to paste the same XML files that you had probably created for the QRadar Classic. And using the same files, you will be able to fetch the data in a JSON format.